Rachel Martinez thought she was having a normal Tuesday morning at Pinewood High School in Austin, Texas. She had just finished setting up her chemistry lab for the third period when her phone buzzed with a text from her colleague across the hall. What she saw next would turn her world upside down and expose the dark side of teenage cruelty in the digital age. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Rachel had been teaching at Pinewood High for 6 years, and at 32, she was one of the younger faculty members. Her chemistry classes were popular. She had a knack for making complex concepts accessible and actually fun. Students respected her because she treated them like adults while maintaining clear boundaries. She never played favorites, never bent the rules, and always held everyone to the same standards. That's exactly why Brandon Calloway and his crew couldn't stand her. Brandon was a senior with a sense of entitlement that came from being the son of a prominent local businessman. He'd coasted through high school on charm and his father's reputation, but chemistry required actual work. When Rachel refused to give him the grade he felt he deserved on a major exam, something shifted in his attitude toward her. The first signs of trouble started small. Snide comments under his breath during class. Eye rolls when she gave instructions. Nothing overtly disrespectful enough to warrant disciplinary action, but enough to create an uncomfortable atmosphere. Rachel had dealt with difficult students before. She documented everything and tried to address it through proper channels. But Brandon wasn't working alone. His tight-knit group included Mason Wright, the star quarterback who was used to teachers looking the other way, and Taylor Hudson, whose razor-sharp wit usually entertained classrooms, but had recently turned cruel. Together, they formed a toxic triangle that fed off each other's worst impulses. The situation escalated after Rachel gave Brandon a failing grade on his midterm project. He'd submitted work that was clearly copied from online sources, not even bothering to change the formatting. When she called him out on it and required him to redo the entire assignment, he exploded. "This is ridiculous," he'd said after class, his voice rising. "You're just picking on me because you don't like me." Rachel remained calm. "Brandon, academic integrity is non-negotiable. You have a week to submit original work, or you'll receive a 0. My dad's going to hear about this," he threatened. "That's your choice," Rachel replied evenly. "But the policy remains the same for everyone." That conversation happened on a Friday. Over the weekend, Brandon stewed in his anger, venting to Mason and Taylor about the unfair treatment. By Monday morning, they had hatched a plan that would go far beyond typical teenage rebellion. It started with Taylor's observation that Rachel was pretty enough to attract attention online. Mason suggested they could have some fun with that fact. Brandon, still furious about his grade, was eager for revenge. The specifics of their plan emerged during lunch break, whispered conversations in the back corner of the cafeteria where teachers rarely ventured. Taylor was skilled with photo editing software. She'd been creating Instagram content since middle school and knew every trick for manipulating images. Mason had connections with students at other schools who might provide useful photos for their scheme. Brandon brought the motivation and the willingness to cross lines that most people wouldn't even consider. They started by collecting photos of Rachel from the school's website, yearbook archives, and social media profiles. Rachel was careful about her online presence, but like most people, she had some public photos, group shots from faculty events, a few professional headshots from the school directory, and some casual pictures from school fundraisers. Taylor spent hours perfecting her digital manipulation skills, seamlessly placing Rachel's face onto increasingly inappropriate images she found online. The technology was sophisticated enough that the results looked disturbingly realistic, especially to anyone who wasn't looking for signs of editing. The photos they created ranged from mildly embarrassing to explicitly compromising. They showed Rachel in scenarios that would be devastating to a teacher's career, situations that suggested unprofessional behavior, inappropriate relationships, and compromising positions that no educator could survive having associated with their name. But creating the images was only the first step. The trio knew that for maximum impact, they needed a distribution strategy that would spread the photos widely before anyone could stop them. Mason suggested starting with anonymous accounts on social media platforms popular with their classmates. Taylor created fake profiles with generic names and stock photo profile pictures. Brandon researched which platforms would give them the widest reach among students, parents, and community members. They launched their attack on a Sunday night, when people would be online browsing social media before the school week began. The fake account simultaneously posted the manipulated photos across multiple platforms, along with captions designed to seem like concerned community members sharing disturbing discoveries about a local teacher. The posts were crafted to sound authentic and worried rather than malicious. "Can't believe this is who's teaching our kids," read one caption. "Parents at Pinewood need to see this," said another. They tagged the school's official accounts, local parent groups, and used hashtags that would ensure maximum visibility. Within hours, the posts were being shared, commented on, and spreading throughout the Pinewood community like wildfire. Parents were tagging other parents. Students were sharing the posts in group chats. The images were being screenshotted and shared on platforms where the original posts weren't even visible. By Monday morning, Rachel's name was trending in local social media groups, and the photos had reached hundreds of people in her community. The boys watched with satisfaction as their plan unfolded exactly as they'd hoped, except they hadn't anticipated how quickly things would spiral completely out of their control. Rachel discovered the photos when her colleague, Jennifer Walsh, texted her a screenshot along with the message, "Rachel, you need to see this. Someone's posting fake photos of you online. This is serious." Standing in her empty classroom that Tuesday morning, Rachel stared at her phone screen in complete shock. The image was unmistakably her face, but the context was something she'd never been part of. The editing was sophisticated enough that anyone who didn't know better might believe it was real. Her hands shaking, she scrolled through the comments below the post. Parents expressing outrage, former students weighing in with opinions, community members calling for her immediate termination. The vitriol was overwhelming, and it was all based on something that never happened. Rachel's first instinct was to call her principal, but she realized she needed to think strategically. This wasn't just a school disciplinary matter. This was potentially criminal. Someone had deliberately created and distributed false, damaging content with her likeness. They'd done it with clear intent to harm her reputation and career. That's when she thought of her brother David. David Martinez had built his legal career on two principles: preparation and precision. As a criminal defense attorney with 12 years of experience in Texas courts, he'd seen every type of case imaginable. But when his sister called him that Tuesday morning, barely able to speak through her tears, he knew this was different. "They're saying I did things I never did, David. The photos look real, but I swear to you, I never." "Rachel, slow down," David interrupted, his voice calm but alert. "Send me everything. Screenshots, links, whatever you have. Don't respond to anything online. Don't make any statements to anyone at school. I'm coming over." David's law office was only 20 minutes from Pinewood High, but he made the drive in 15. His mind was already working through the legal implications as Rachel showed him the posts spreading across social media. What he saw made his jaw clench with anger. The photos were sophisticated. Deep fakes manipulated images that placed Rachel's face onto explicit content with disturbing precision. But David's trained eye caught details that others might miss. Slight inconsistencies in lighting, pixel variations where the editing had occurred, and metadata that could potentially trace back to the source. "This isn't just cyberbullying," he told Rachel grimly. "This is criminal. We're looking at potential charges for harassment, defamation, distribution of non-consensual intimate imagery, and possibly identity theft." While David began documenting everything, the situation at Pinewood High was deteriorating rapidly. Principal Sandra Hoffman had arrived at school to find her voicemail full of angry messages from parents demanding Rachel's immediate termination. The school district's communication director was fielding calls from local news outlets who'd caught wind of the scandal. By second period, students were openly discussing the photos in hallways. Teachers were struggling to maintain normal classroom environments while dealing with whispered conversations and smartphone screens. The administration faced an impossible situation. How do you address a crisis based on fabricated evidence while protecting an innocent employee? Brandon, Mason, and Taylor watched the chaos unfold with a mixture of excitement and growing unease. Their plan was working better than they'd anticipated, perhaps too well. Brandon had expected some social media buzz that would embarrass Rachel and force her to go easier on him. He hadn't expected the story to explode across the entire community. During lunch, Taylor noticed something that made her stomach drop. A local news van was parked outside the school. "Guys," she whispered urgently, "this is getting way bigger than we planned." Mason, who'd been bragging about their success all morning, suddenly looked worried. "It's fine. There's no way they can trace it back to us. We used fake accounts and public Wi-Fi." But Taylor, whose technical skills had made their scheme possible, knew better. "The digital footprints are harder to erase than you think," she said quietly. "Maybe we should..." "Should what?" Brandon snapped. "Confess? Are you insane? We stick to the plan. We don't know anything about any photos." Meanwhile, David was making calls to contacts throughout the legal system. His first stop was Detective Maria Santos with the Austin Police Department's Cybercrime Unit. Santos had worked with David on several cases and trusted his judgment. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "What you're describing sounds like a coordinated attack," Santos told him after reviewing the evidence. "The timing, the multiple platform distribution, the sophisticated editing. This wasn't done by someone acting alone or on impulse." David had reached the same conclusion. The perpetrators know Rachel personally. They have access to her photos, knowledge of her workplace, and understanding of how to cause maximum damage to her specific situation. Santos agreed to open an investigation, but she warned David about the challenges ahead. Digital evidence can be tricky. People can hide behind VPNs, anonymous accounts, and public computers. But if these kids made mistakes, and they usually do, we'll find them. By Wednesday morning, the story had reached beyond social media. A local blogger who covered education issues had written a piece questioning the school district's response. Parent Facebook groups were divided between those calling for Rachel's firing and others defending her right to due process. Rachel hadn't slept in 2 days. Every time she checked her phone, there were new comments, new shares, new people forming opinions about her based on fabricated evidence. The stress was overwhelming, but David's presence provided crucial support. "We're going to fight this systematically," he assured her. "First, we document everything. Then we trace the source. Finally, we make sure whoever did this faces the full consequences of their actions." The break they needed came from an unexpected source. Taylor Hudson, increasingly panicked about the investigation she knew was coming, made a critical error. She logged into one of her fake accounts from her personal phone while connected to her home Wi-Fi network, the same network she'd used for legitimate social media activity under her real name. Detective Santos's cybercrime team identified the connection within 48 hours of beginning their investigation. The digital trail led directly back to Taylor's home address, and from there, Phone records and social media analysis revealed her connections to Brandon and Mason. Thursday morning, Santos called David with an update. "We've identified 3 suspects, all students at Pinewood High. We're preparing search warrants for their devices and social media accounts." David felt a mixture of relief and grim satisfaction. "What charges are you considering?" "Cyberstalking, harassment, identity theft, and distribution of fabricated intimate imagery. Texas has specific laws about deepfake pornography that carry serious penalties." The arrests happened Friday morning. Brandon was pulled out of first period calculus. Mason was escorted from football practice. Taylor was taken into custody at her part-time job at a local coffee shop. Each of them faced the same charges, but their reactions couldn't have been more different. Brandon immediately demanded to speak to his father's lawyer, maintaining his innocence and claiming he was being framed. Mason broke down crying, admitting his involvement, but insisting it was supposed to be a harmless prank. Taylor, faced with overwhelming digital evidence, confessed fully and expressed genuine remorse for her actions. The investigation revealed the full scope of their scheme. Taylor's devices contained the original photos, editing software with cached versions of the manipulated images, and detailed records of their planning conversations. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. News of the arrests spread through Pinewood High even faster than the original photos had circulated online. Students who'd participated in sharing the images suddenly realized they'd been part of something much more serious than gossip. Teachers began discussions about digital citizenship and the real consequences of online actions. For Rachel, the arrests brought validation but not relief. The fake photos were still circulating, and despite the truth being revealed, she knew that some people would always harbor doubts. The damage to her reputation would take time to repair, and trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild completely. But she also felt something else: determination. This experience had shown her the importance of fighting back against digital abuse. She wasn't just seeking justice for herself, she was establishing a precedent for how seriously these crimes should be taken. The courtroom proceedings began 3 months later, but the real drama started long before anyone set foot in Judge Patricia Hendricks's courtroom. The case had attracted attention from legal experts across Texas, as it represented one of the first major prosecutions under the state's recently updated deepfake legislation. District Attorney Michael Chun assigned his most experienced digital crimes prosecutor, Assistant DA Jennifer Walsh, to handle the case. Walsh had prosecuted cybercrime cases for 8 years, but even she admitted this case presented unique challenges. "The technology is evolving faster than the law," Walsh explained to her team during case preparation. "We need to make sure the jury understands not just what happened, but why it matters for society as a whole." The defendants had been released on bail, but their lives had changed dramatically. Brandon Kellaway's father, prominent businessman Robert Kellaway, had initially hired an expensive legal team and publicly proclaimed his son's innocence. However, when the digital evidence became clear, even Robert couldn't deny reality. The family's reputation in Austin's business community suffered immediate damage. Robert's construction company lost 3 major contracts as clients distanced themselves from the scandal. The Kellaway name, once synonymous with success and community leadership, became associated with privilege and entitlement gone wrong. Brandon himself struggled with the transition from small-town celebrity to criminal defendant. His college acceptance to Texas A&M was revoked after the charges became public. Friends who'd once sought his attention now avoided him entirely. The football team, where he'd served as team captain, stripped him of his leadership role. Mason Wright faced different, but equally severe consequences. His football scholarship to the University of Houston disappeared overnight. College scouts who'd been courting him for 2 years stopped returning calls. His parents, both teachers in the Austin School District, faced professional scrutiny and social isolation within their own community. The football team's season collapsed without their star quarterback. What should have been Mason's triumphant senior year became a cautionary tale about how quickly success can evaporate. His former teammates oscillated between anger at his actions and sadness for their lost championship hopes. Taylor Hudson's situation was perhaps the most complex. Her technical skills, which had made the entire scheme possible, also made her the most culpable in prosecutors' eyes. Unlike her co-defendants, Taylor came from a middle-class family without resources for expensive legal representation. Her court-appointed attorney, experienced public defender Carlos Rodriguez, recognized that Taylor's best option was cooperation. "The evidence against you is overwhelming," he told her bluntly. "Your best chance is to take responsibility, show genuine remorse, and help the prosecution understand exactly how this was done." Taylor's decision to cooperate fully proved crucial for the prosecution's case. She provided detailed testimony about the photo manipulation process, the platforms used for distribution, and the group's planning conversations. Her technical expertise helped prosecutors explain to the jury exactly how sophisticated the deception had been. Meanwhile, Rachel was navigating the complicated process of rebuilding her life and career. The school district had placed her on administrative leave during the initial investigation, but once the truth emerged, they faced their own legal exposure for their handling of the situation. Superintendent Dr. Margaret Foster found herself in an impossible position. The district needed to support Rachel while also addressing the legitimate concerns of parents and community members who'd been genuinely disturbed by the fabricated images. The situation required a delicate balance between justice and public relations. Rachel's return to the classroom came with mixed reactions. Some students and parents embraced her as a victim who'd been wronged. Others maintained lingering suspicions. Despite the clear evidence of manipulation, the hallway conversations she'd once navigated easily now carried undertones of whispered speculation. But Rachel discovered unexpected sources of support. Teachers from other districts reached out to share their own experiences with digital harassment. Legal advocates invited her to speak about online safety at conferences. Her experience, while traumatic, positioned her to help others facing similar attacks. The trial itself became a fascinating intersection of technology and law. Prosecutor Walsh brought in expert witnesses to explain deepfake technology, digital forensics, and the psychological impact of image-based sexual abuse. The jury, composed of 8 women and 4 men ranging in age from 23 to 67, needed extensive education about concepts that were foreign to many of them. Defense attorneys attempted various strategies. Brandon's lawyer, seasoned criminal defense attorney Patricia Morrison, argued that her client was a misguided teenager whose actions, while wrong, didn't rise to the level of criminal behavior. She painted him as someone who'd made a terrible mistake in judgment rather than a calculating criminal. Mason's attorney took a different approach, emphasizing his client's previously clean record and arguing that he'd been led astray by more dominant personalities. Character witnesses testified about Mason's volunteer work and academic achievements, attempting to present him as a fundamentally good person who'd temporarily lost his way. But the prosecution's case was methodical and overwhelming. Digital forensics expert Dr. Sarah Kim walked the jury through the technical evidence step by step. She showed how the photos had been created, distributed, and traced back to the defendant's devices. Her testimony made clear that this wasn't a spontaneous prank, but a carefully planned attack. Victim impact testimony proved especially powerful. Rachel took the stand to describe how the fabricated images had affected every aspect of her life. Her voice remained steady as she explained the professional consequences, the social isolation, and the ongoing anxiety about how the images might resurface in the future. The defendants didn't just create fake photos, Rachel testified. They created a false reality that hundreds of people believed. They weaponized technology to attack my reputation, my career, and my sense of safety in my own community. David Martinez watched his sister's testimony with quiet pride. The shy woman who'd called him in tears 3 months earlier had transformed into an articulate advocate for victims of digital abuse. Her strength on the witness stand demonstrated how trauma can sometimes forge resilience. The prosecution also called Dr. Amanda Foster, a psychologist specializing in cyber harassment, who explained the long-term impacts of image-based abuse. Her research showed that victims often experience symptoms similar to those of sexual assault survivors, including anxiety, depression, and hypervigilance about their online presence. The psychological harm doesn't end when the truth comes out. Dr. Foster explained, victims live with the knowledge that these fabricated images exist somewhere in digital space, potentially resurfacing at any time. The trauma becomes chronic rather than acute. As the trial progressed, media attention intensified. Local news coverage expanded to national outlets interested in the legal precedent being set. Legal scholars debated the implications for free speech, digital rights, and criminal law in the age of artificial intelligence. The case attracted attention from technology companies grappling with deepfake content on their platforms. Representatives from major social media companies attended portions of the trial, taking notes about detection methods and legal liability issues that could affect their policies. Educational institutions across Texas began incorporating the case into digital citizenship curricula. Rachel's experience became a teaching tool for helping students understand the real-world consequences of online actions and the legal protections available to victims of digital abuse. As closing arguments approached, all parties recognized that the verdict would extend far beyond these 3 defendants. The case represented a crucial test of whether traditional legal systems could effectively address emerging forms of digital harm. The jury deliberated for 6 hours across 2 days. When they returned to Judge Hendricks's courtroom on a gray Thursday afternoon, the tension was palpable. Families from all sides packed the gallery, while local media representatives filled the remaining seats. Jury foreman William Chun, a software engineer who'd become the group's unofficial technology interpreter, stood to deliver the verdicts. His background had proven invaluable during deliberations, helping other jurors understand the technical complexity of the evidence. In the case of the state of Texas versus Brandon Kellaway, Chun announced, his voice steady, we find the defendant guilty on all counts: cyberstalking, harassment, identity theft, and distribution of fabricated intimate imagery. Brandon's mother gasped audibly. His father sat motionless, his face a mask of controlled devastation. Brandon himself closed his eyes, the reality of his situation finally sinking in completely. In the case of the state of Texas versus Mason, right, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. Mason's parents reached for each other's hands. His mother had been crying intermittently throughout the trial, but now her tears came freely. Mason stared straight ahead, his athletic shoulders slumped in defeat. In the case of the state of Texas versus Taylor Hudson, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. Taylor had expected this outcome, especially after deciding to cooperate with prosecutors. Still, hearing the words spoken aloud brought a finality that made her stomach lurch. Her grandmother, who'd raised her after her parents' deaths, squeezed her hand tightly. Judge Hendricks scheduled sentencing for 3 weeks later, allowing time for pre-sentence investigations and victim impact statements. The verdicts made headlines across Texas and attracted national attention from legal experts tracking digital crime prosecution. During the sentencing phase, the differences between the defendants became even more apparent. Brandon's legal team presented character witnesses who spoke about his volunteer work and community involvement, attempting to portray his actions as aberrant behavior rather than representative of his true character. Prosecutor Walsh countered with evidence of Brandon's pattern of entitlement and disrespect for authority. Teachers testified about his classroom behavior. Coaches described his attitude toward rules. And former girlfriends spoke about his controlling tendencies and inability to accept rejection. Mason's sentencing hearing focused heavily on his athletic achievements and potential. His high school coach, James Patterson, provided emotional testimony about Mason's leadership qualities and the positive influence he'd had on younger players. Mason made a terrible mistake, Coach Patterson testified. But I've seen him mentor struggling students, volunteer at youth camps, and demonstrate real character in difficult situations. This doesn't excuse what he did, but it shows there's more to him than this one awful decision. Taylor's hearing was markedly different. Her cooperation with prosecutors earned consideration, but her technical role in creating and distributing the images made her culpability undeniable. Public Defender Rodriguez emphasized her difficult background and genuine remorse. Taylor Hudson grew up without parents, raised by a grandmother working 2 jobs to make ends meet, Rodriguez argued. She found validation through her technical skills, but those same skills were manipulated by others who saw an opportunity to use her abilities for their own purposes. Rachel provided victim impact statements for all 3 sentencing hearings. Her words were carefully measured but powerful, describing the ongoing effects of their actions on her professional and personal life. I've taught hundreds of students. Over the years, Rachel told Judge Hendricks, I've seen teenagers make mistakes, act impulsively, and show poor judgment. But this wasn't a mistake or poor judgment. This was a calculated attack designed to destroy my career and reputation. The defendants spent weeks planning how to cause me maximum harm. She continued, the images they created will exist forever in digital space. Even though everyone knows they're fake, I live with the constant anxiety that they might resurface at any time. Every new job application, every introduction to new colleagues, every parent-teacher conference carries the fear that someone might remember those images. The sentences reflected both the seriousness of the crimes and the individual circumstances of each defendant. Brandon, as the ringleader with the least cooperation and remorse, received the harshest punishment, 2 years in state prison, 5 years probation, 500 hours of community service, and mandatory counseling. Judge Hendricks addressed Brandon directly during sentencing. Your actions demonstrate a troubling disregard for others and a sense of entitlement that led you to believe you could destroy someone's life without consequences. This sentence reflects society's determination that such behavior will not be tolerated. Mason received 18 months in county jail, 4 years probation, 400 hours of community service, and mandatory anger management counseling. His athletic scholarship was permanently revoked, but the judge acknowledged his cooperation and apparent genuine remorse. Your athletic abilities gave you status and opportunity, Judge Hendricks told Mason. Instead of using those gifts responsibly, you participated in a cruel attack on an innocent person. However, your remorse appears genuine, and I hope you'll use this experience to become the leader you have the potential to be. Taylor's sentence was the most lenient, reflecting her cooperation and difficult circumstances. 1 year in county jail with work release eligibility, 3 years probation, 300 hours of community service focused on digital literacy education, and mandatory counseling. Your technical skills could be a force for good in the world, Judge Hendricks observed. Instead, you use them to cause harm. I'm ordering you to use those same skills to educate others about digital responsibility as part of your community service. The civil lawsuits that followed the criminal cases proved equally significant. David Martinez filed suit against all 3 defendants and their families, seeking damages for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and violation of privacy rights. The civil cases settled out of court for undisclosed amounts, but legal observers estimated the total settlements exceeded $500,000. The Kellaway family's insurance coverage was insufficient, requiring them to liquidate significant assets. Mason's family faced financial hardship that would last for years. Taylor's grandmother's modest savings were entirely depleted. Beyond the immediate legal consequences, the case sparked broader changes in policy and practice. The Texas legislature passed the Rachel Martinez Digital Protection Act, strengthening penalties for deepfake crimes and providing additional legal remedies for victims. School districts across the state implemented new digital citizenship curricula. Based partly on Rachel's experience, the Pinewood High case became a mandatory study topic in many programs, helping students understand the real-world consequences of online harassment. Social media platforms updated their policies and detection algorithms in response to the case. The sophisticated nature of the images used against Rachel highlighted gaps in existing content, moderation systems, and spurred investment in better deepfake detection technology. Rachel's own life evolved in unexpected directions. She continued teaching at Pinewood High, where she eventually became department head. But she also began speaking at conferences about digital harassment, working with legal advocacy groups, and consulting with technology companies on safety policies. "I never wanted to become a public figure," Rachel reflected during a conference. Presentation 2 years after the trial. "But if my experience can help other victims understand their rights and prevent future attacks, then something positive has come from something terrible." The 3 defendants' lives took dramatically different paths after their sentences. Brandon served his full prison term and struggled to rebuild his life afterward. His family's business never fully recovered, and he eventually moved to another state to escape the notoriety. Mason completed his jail sentence and used his community service hours coaching youth football in underserved communities. The experience changed his perspective on privilege and responsibility, and he eventually became an advocate for digital responsibility education in schools. Taylor's technical skills, combined with her community service experience, led to a career in cybersecurity education. She developed programs teaching digital safety to teenagers and frequently spoke about the consequences of her actions. Her grandmother lived to see her graduate from community college with honors. The case established important legal precedents that influenced similar prosecutions across the country. Prosecutors in other states cited the Pinewood High case when seeking convictions for deepfake crimes, and defense attorneys studied its strategies and outcomes. 5 years later, the Rachel Martinez case remains a landmark in digital crime prosecution. It demonstrated that technology-enabled harassment would be taken seriously by the legal system and provided a roadmap for future victims seeking justice. The broader lesson extended beyond the courtroom. In an age of rapidly evolving technology, the law must evolve as well to protect innocent people from those who would weaponize digital tools for cruelty. Rachel's courage in fighting back didn't just secure justice for herself. It helped ensure that future victims would have stronger legal protections and clearer paths to accountability. The fake photos that once threatened to destroy her life became evidence in a case that strengthened protections for everyone. Sometimes the most powerful response to an attack is to fight back with everything you have and make sure it never happens to anyone else. 3 years after the verdicts, Rachel Martinez stood before a packed auditorium at Stanford University, delivering the keynote address at the National Conference on Digital Safety and Ethics. The woman who once trembled at discovering fake photos of herself online now commanded attention from tech executives, lawmakers, and educators across the country. "Digital weapons don't leave physical scars," Rachel told the audience, "but they can destroy lives just as effectively as any traditional weapon. The difference is that digital attacks can be launched by anyone with a smartphone and malicious intent." In the audience sat Dr. Alana Vasquez, a researcher from MIT who had been following Rachel's case since the trial. Dr. Vasquez's team had developed new deepfake detection algorithms, partly inspired by the sophisticated manipulation used against Rachel. The technology was now being implemented by major social media platforms worldwide. After Rachel's presentation, Dr. Vasquez approached her backstage. "Your case changed how we think about AI safety," she explained. "We've created detection systems that can identify manipulated images with 97% accuracy, but we needed to understand the human impact to design them properly." The ripple effects of the Pinewood High case had indeed spread far beyond Austin, Texas. In California, State Senator Maria Gonzalez had sponsored legislation requiring all high schools to include digital ethics courses in their curricula. Bill, nicknamed Rachel's Law by supporters, passed with overwhelming bipartisan support. What happened to Rachel Martinez could happen to any teacher, any parent, any person with a social media presence, Senator Gonzalez argued during floor debates. "We have a responsibility to prepare our young people for the ethical challenges of digital citizenship." Meanwhile, in Austin, the original perpetrators were experiencing vastly different outcomes from their shared crime. Brandon Kellaway had completed his prison sentence, but struggled to rebuild his life. The privileged young man who once felt entitled to destroy someone's reputation now worked night shifts at a warehouse, his college dreams permanently derailed. His family's construction business had never recovered from the scandal. Robert Kellaway, once a prominent figure in Austin's business community, had been forced to sell the company and relocate to a smaller town where the family name carried less baggage. The move strained his marriage, and Brandon's parents divorced quietly 2 years after the trial. Brandon himself had attempted to rebuild relationships with former friends, but the bridge-burning nature of his actions made reconciliation nearly impossible. His social media presence, once filled with confident posts about his bright future, remained dormant. The digital world that had once amplified his status now served as a permanent reminder of his downfall. Mason Wright's journey took a dramatically different direction. After completing his jail sentence, he threw himself into community service work with an intensity that surprised everyone who knew him. His mandatory 400 hours expanded into voluntary work that consumed most of his free time. At the East Side Community Center, Mason coached football for kids from low-income families. Many of his players came from broken homes and faced challenges that made Mason's own privileged background seem almost foreign. The experience fundamentally changed his perspective on responsibility and second chances. Coach Mason tells us about making mistakes and learning from them, said 12-year-old Carlos Mendez, one of his players. "He doesn't just talk about it, he shows us how to be better people." Mason's transformation caught the attention of Dr. James Rivera, a criminology professor at the University of Texas who studied rehabilitation and recidivism. Dr. Rivera began documenting Mason's case as part of a larger study on how young offenders could successfully reintegrate into society. Mason Wright represents the possibility of genuine redemption, Dr. Rivera observed. His crime was serious and harmful, but his response to consequences shows that some people can truly change. Mason had applied to several colleges with criminal justice programs, hoping to eventually work in youth rehabilitation. His applications included essays about his experience that were brutally honest about his actions and their consequences. 3 schools accepted him, recognizing both his potential and his unique perspective on the juvenile justice system. Taylor Hudson's path proved equally compelling but in a different direction. Her technical skills, combined with court-ordered community service and digital education, had evolved into a genuine passion for cybersecurity advocacy. Working with organizations like the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, Taylor developed programs teaching teenagers about the dangers of digital manipulation. "I know exactly how these attacks work because I created them," Taylor explained during a presentation to high school students in Dallas. I can teach you to recognize manipulation techniques because I've used them. The goal isn't to make you paranoid, it's to make you informed. Her grandmother, Rosa Hudson, watched these presentations with a mixture of pride and sadness. My granddaughter did something terrible, Rosa told a local reporter covering Taylor's advocacy work. But watching her try to prevent other kids from making the same mistakes, that gives me hope. Taylor's work caught the attention of cybersecurity firms looking for specialists in deepfake detection and prevention. Despite her criminal record, several companies offered her positions based on her unique expertise and demonstrated commitment to using her skills constructively. At Pinewood High School, the changes implemented after the scandal had become permanent fixtures of the educational environment. The mandatory digital citizenship course developed in response to Rachel's case was now being copied by school districts across the state. We study the Pinewood case every semester, explained current senior Amanda Foster. It's weird knowing it happened right here in our school, but it makes the lessons feel more real. Like this stuff actually happens to real people, not just in news stories. The case had also influenced hiring and training practices throughout the district. New teachers received extensive orientation about digital safety, social media policies, and resources available if they became targets of online harassment. Principal Sandra Hoffman, who had navigated the crisis 3 years earlier, now served on a state committee developing best practices for schools dealing with digital harassment incidents. Her experience managing the fallout from Rachel's case made her a sought-after expert on crisis communication and victim support. We learned that the first response is crucial, Hoffman explained to other administrators. Support the victim immediately. Gather facts carefully and communicate transparently with all stakeholders. Most importantly, don't let fear of controversy prevent you from doing the right thing. The legal precedents established by the case continued influencing prosecutions across the country. District attorneys in 12 states had successfully used the Pinewood High case as a model for pursuing charges in similar incidents. The legal strategies developed by prosecutor Jennifer Walsh had become standard practice in many jurisdictions. Defense attorneys, meanwhile, studied the case to understand how courts would likely handle deepfake crimes. The different sentences received by Brandon, Mason, and Taylor provided a roadmap for plea negotiations and sentencing arguments in future cases. Judge Patricia Hendricks had been invited to speak at judicial conferences about handling technology-related crimes. Her approach to balancing punishment with the defendant's ages and potential for rehabilitation had been praised by legal scholars as a model for similar cases. The challenge with these emerging crimes is finding sentences that reflect their seriousness while still allowing for redemption, Judge Hendricks explained to fellow judges. Technology amplifies both the potential for harm and the possibility for positive change. Rachel's brother David had leveraged his experience with the case to specialize in cyber harassment law. His practice now handled dozens of similar cases, annually representing victims of revenge porn, deepfake attacks, and other forms of digital abuse. Rachel's case opened my eyes to how vulnerable everyone is in the digital age, David reflected. The legal system is still catching up to technology, but we're making progress. Every case we win makes it easier for the next victim to find justice. The social media platforms where the fake images had originally spread implemented new policies and detection systems directly inspired by the case. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok all developed specialized teams for handling deepfake content with response protocols that prioritized rapid removal and account suspension. Dr. Sarah Kim, the digital forensics expert who had testified in the original trial, now consulted with these platforms on improving their detection capabilities. The technical evidence from Rachel's case had provided valuable data for training artificial intelligence systems to identify manipulated content. The Pinewood High case gave us a real-world example of sophisticated deepfake creation and distribution. Dr. Kim explained, "We learned how quickly false content can spread and how difficult it can be to contain once released. That knowledge directly influenced platform policies worldwide." As Rachel concluded her Stanford presentation, she reflected on how far she'd traveled from that terrible Tuesday morning when she first saw the fake photos. The journey from victim to advocate hadn't been easy, but it had given her a sense of purpose she'd never expected. "I can't undo what happened to me," she told the audience in her closing remarks. "But I can help ensure that future victims have better protections, faster responses, and stronger legal remedies." Sometimes the most powerful response to an attack is to make sure it never happens to anyone else. The standing ovation that followed seemed to last forever, but Rachel knew the real measure of success would be in the policies implemented, the technologies developed, and the young people educated. Because of her story, the fake photos that had once threatened to destroy her life had instead become the foundation for protecting countless others. The international implications of the case extended far beyond American borders. Dr. Kenji Nakamura from Tokyo University had traveled to Austin specifically to study the legal framework that emerged from Rachel's case. Japan was grappling with similar deepfake incidents, and Dr. Nakamura hoped to adapt the Texas model for implementation in Japanese courts. "The precision of your legal response impressed our Ministry of Justice," Dr. Nakamura explained during his meeting with David Martinez. "We are seeing similar attacks on teachers and public figures in Japan, but our legal system lacks specific remedies. Your sister's case provides a blueprint we can follow." The global nature of digital harassment had become increasingly apparent to law enforcement agencies worldwide. Interpol established a new task force specifically focused on image-based sexual abuse, with the Pinewood High case serving as their primary training example for investigators. Detective Maria Santos, who had led the original cybercrime investigation, now traveled internationally as a consultant for police departments, establishing their own digital harassment units. Her methodical approach to tracing the fake images back to their creators had become the gold standard for similar investigations. "Every case teaches us something new about digital evidence preservation," Santos explained to a room of European investigators in Brussels. "The Pinewood case showed us that perpetrators almost always leave digital breadcrumbs. You just need to know where to look and how to follow them." Back in Austin, the economic impact of the case continued reverberating through unexpected channels. The city's growing reputation as a hub for digital safety research attracted technology companies and research institutions. 3 major cybersecurity firms had relocated regional headquarters to Austin specifically because of the expertise developed around the Pinewood case. Austin Mayor Patricia Williams recognized the unique opportunity this presented for the city's economic development. "What began as a tragedy for one of our teachers has evolved into positioning Austin as a national leader in digital safety innovation," Mayor Williams announced during a tech industry conference. The University of Texas at Austin established the Martinez Center for Digital Ethics, endowed by anonymous donors who had been moved by Rachel's story. The center brought together researchers from computer science, law, psychology, and education to study the intersection of technology and human behavior. Dr. Amanda Chun, the center's founding director, had been following Rachel's case since the trial. The Pinewood incident revealed gaps in our understanding of how digital attacks affect victims psychologically, legally, and socially, Dr. Chun explained. "Our research aims to close those gaps and prevent future harm." The center's first major study examined the long-term psychological effects of deepfake attacks on victims. The research team interviewed 50 individuals who had experienced similar harassment, with Rachel serving as both a subject and collaborator in the study design. "Most people assume that once the truth comes out, victims can simply move on," explained Dr. Lisa Park, the study's lead researcher. "But our data shows that victims experience ongoing anxiety, hypervigilance about their online presence, and difficulty trusting digital communications for years after the initial attack. The study's findings influenced therapy protocols for digital harassment victims and informed policy recommendations for law enforcement agencies. Mental health professionals across the country began receiving specialized training in treating victims of image-based abuse. Meanwhile, the technology industry's response to deepfake harassment had accelerated dramatically. Silicon Valley companies competed to develop the most effective detection algorithms, with venture capital firms investing hundreds of millions of dollars in anti-deepfake startups. TruthGuard Technologies, founded by former Google engineer Michael Chan, created software that could analyze images in real time and flag potential manipulations. The company's success stemmed partly from studying the specific techniques used in Rachel's case, which provided valuable training data for their algorithms. The Pinewood case gave us a detailed roadmap of how sophisticated attackers operate. Chang explained to investors, "Understanding their methods allowed us to build defenses that could actually stop them." The educational sector embraced these technological solutions rapidly. School districts across 43 states now used automated systems to monitor for deepfake content involving their staff members. The early warning systems could detect and flag potentially harmful content before it gained widespread distribution. However, the technological arms race between deepfake creators and detectors continued escalating. Dr. Rebecca Torres, a computer science professor at MIT, warned that detection technology alone couldn't solve the underlying problem. For every advancement in detection, attackers develop more sophisticated creation methods, Dr. Torres cautioned during a congressional hearing on digital harassment. Technology is important, but education and legal deterrence remain our most effective long-term strategies. Rachel's advocacy work had evolved into a full-time position with the National Digital Safety Foundation, a nonprofit organization established specifically to combat image-based abuse. Her role involved policy advocacy, victim support, and public education campaigns. The foundation's headquarters in Washington, D.C., became a hub for coordinating responses to digital harassment incidents nationwide. Rachel worked alongside former FBI cybercrime specialists, constitutional law experts, and trauma counselors to provide comprehensive support for victims. We learned from Rachel's experience that victims need immediate legal guidance, technical assistance, and emotional support, explained Foundation Director Sarah Mitchell. Our rapid response team can mobilize within hours of an incident being reported. The Foundation had already assisted over 300 victims of deepfake attacks, with success rates that far exceeded what individual victims could achieve on their own. The systematic approach developed around Rachel's case proved scalable and effective across diverse situations. Corporate America also grappled with the implications of deepfake technology in workplace harassment. Human resources departments began developing policies for addressing digitally manipulated content involving employees, with many consulting the legal precedents established in Rachel's case. Jennifer Walsh, the prosecutor who had secured convictions in the original case, left public service to establish a specialized law firm focused exclusively on digital harassment cases. Her practice attracted clients from across the country, seeking expertise in navigating the complex intersection of technology and law. The legal landscape has changed dramatically since the Pinewood case, Walsh observed. Victims now have clearer paths to justice, but they need attorneys who understand both the technology and the evolving legal framework. The firm's success led to the establishment of similar practices in major cities nationwide. A new legal specialty had emerged, with attorneys commanding premium fees for their expertise in digital harassment law. Insurance companies responded to this trend by developing new products specifically covering digital harassment incidents. Professional liability policies for teachers, public figures, and social media influencers now included coverage for reputation management. legal fees, and counseling services related to deepfake attacks. The entertainment industry, particularly concerned about deepfake technology's potential for unauthorized use of celebrity likenesses, lobbied successfully for federal legislation strengthening intellectual property protections. The resulting law included provisions inspired directly by Rachel's case. Academic conferences dedicated to digital ethics now featured annual panels examining the Pinewood case's ongoing influence. Law schools incorporated the case into their curricula as a landmark example of how legal systems adapt to technological challenges. Professor Margaret Foster at Harvard Law School assigned the case as required reading in her cyber law course. The Pinewood case demonstrates how a single incident can catalyze systematic change across multiple institutions, Professor Foster explained to her students. It shows the power of individual courage in shaping societal responses to emerging threats. The case had also influenced international legal frameworks. The European Union's updated Digital Services Act included specific provisions for deepfake content, with language directly influenced by the legal strategies developed in Rachel's case. 5 years after the initial incident, Rachel received an unexpected phone call. Taylor Hudson, now working as a cybersecurity consultant, wanted to meet in person to discuss a collaborative project aimed at preventing similar attacks. "I know I have no right to ask for your time," Taylor said nervously as they sat in a quiet Austin coffee shop. "But I've been working on detection software that could have prevented what I did to you. I think we could help a lot of people if we work together." Rachel studied the young woman across from her, seeing genuine remorse and determination. "Tell me about your project," she said finally. Taylor's software combined technical detection capabilities with educational components that taught users to identify manipulated content. The program had already been tested in several high schools, with promising results. Students learned to spot manipulation techniques while also understanding the human impact of digital attacks. Taylor explained, "It's not just about technology, it's about building empathy and ethical awareness." Rachel agreed to serve as an advisor to the project, recognizing that Taylor's unique perspective as both perpetrator and reformed advocate could provide valuable insights. Their collaboration would eventually produce one of the most effective digital literacy programs in the country. The collaboration between Rachel and Taylor sparked interest from unexpected quarters. Netflix approached them about documenting their joint advocacy work for a series on digital redemption and second chances. The streaming giant had been developing content about technology's impact on society, and their story offered a unique perspective on transformation and healing. "Your story challenges viewers to think beyond simple victim-perpetrator narratives," explained Netflix producer David Kim during their initial meeting. "It shows how people can grow beyond their worst moments and work together for positive change." While Rachel initially hesitated about the media attention, she recognized the educational potential. The documentary series would reach millions of viewers worldwide, spreading awareness about deepfake harassment and prevention strategies far beyond academic conferences and policy circles. The filming process proved emotionally challenging for both women. Taylor struggled with revisiting her actions and their consequences, while Rachel had to relive the trauma of discovering the fake images. However, their on-camera conversations revealed remarkable insights about forgiveness, accountability, and the possibility of redemption. "I spent years hating what Taylor did to me," Rachel admitted during one particularly intense filming session. "But watching her dedicate her life to preventing others from making the same mistakes, that changed something in me. Hate is exhausting. The purpose is energizing." The documentary's impact exceeded everyone's expectations. Within weeks of its release, the National Digital Safety Foundation received over 10,000 inquiries from viewers seeking help with similar situations. Schools across 6 countries requested Rachel and Taylor's educational materials. Technology companies reached out about licensing their detection software. Dr. Marcus Webb, a social psychologist at Columbia University, began studying the documentary's influence on public attitudes toward digital harassment. His research revealed that viewers who watched the series showed significantly increased empathy for victims and greater willingness to report suspicious online content. Media representation matters enormously in shaping social responses to emerging crimes, Dr. Webb explained. The Rachel Martinez story helped people understand that digital harassment isn't just kids being kids. It's serious criminal behavior with lasting consequences. The success led to international speaking engagements for both Rachel and Taylor. They addressed the European Parliament about digital rights legislation, spoke at technology conferences in Singapore and Sydney, and consulted with the United Nations on developing global frameworks for addressing online harassment. During their presentation to UN officials in Geneva, Rachel emphasized the need for coordinated international responses. Digital attacks cross borders instantly, she told the Assembly. Our legal and social responses must be equally swift and coordinated. Taylor's technical expertise proved invaluable in these international discussions. Her detailed explanations of deepfake creation methods helped policymakers understand the scope of the threat and develop more effective countermeasures. Understanding how attacks work is essential for designing defenses, Taylor explained to a room of European cybersecurity officials. I can teach you to think like an attacker because I was one. That knowledge is crucial for staying ahead of evolving threats. The international attention also attracted critics who questioned whether the case deserved such widespread focus. Some argued that the media coverage glorified criminal behavior and gave attackers too much attention. Professor Daniel Rodriguez at Georgetown University's Law Center published a controversial paper arguing that extensive media coverage of digital harassment cases could inspire copycat attacks. The Pinewood case has become so well known that it risks becoming a blueprint for future attackers, he warned. Rachel addressed these concerns directly during subsequent speaking engagements. Silence and shame benefit attackers, she argued. Transparency and education protect potential victims. We can't prevent what we won't acknowledge. The debate sparked valuable discussions about responsible media coverage of digital crimes. Journalism schools began incorporating lessons from the Pinewood case into their ethics curricula, examining how to balance public education with avoiding harmful publicity for perpetrators. Meanwhile, the technology industry's investments in anti-deepfake research continued accelerating. The Department of Defense awarded a $50 million contract to a consortium of companies developing military-grade detection systems, with civilian applications expected to follow. Private sector innovation flourished alongside government initiatives. Startup companies emerged almost monthly, each claiming breakthrough advances in detection accuracy or processing speed. The competitive pressure drove rapid technological advancement that might otherwise have taken decades to achieve. However, the cat-and-mouse game between detection and creation technologies grew increasingly sophisticated. Criminal organizations began employing advanced deepfake techniques for fraud, espionage, and disinformation campaigns that went far beyond personal harassment. FBI Director Catherine Morrison testified before Congress about the escalating threat. What began as individual attacks like the Pinewood case has evolved into organized criminal enterprises using deepfake technology for large-scale fraud operations. She warned, "We need enhanced legal tools and international cooperation to address this growing threat." The testimony led to bipartisan support for the Deepfake Accountability Act, comprehensive federal legislation that established national standards for prosecution and provided funding for law enforcement training. Rachel was invited to provide expert testimony during congressional hearings on the bill. 5 years ago, I was just a chemistry teacher who became a victim, Rachel told the House Judiciary Committee. Today, I'm asking you to ensure that future victims have stronger protections than I did. Technology evolves rapidly. Our laws must evolve with it. The legislation passed with overwhelming support, establishing Rachel's case as the foundational example for federal deepfake prosecution guidelines. Law enforcement agencies nationwide began implementing training programs based on Detective Santos's investigative methods. Educational institutions embraced the federal mandate for digital literacy education. The curriculum developed around Rachel's case became the template for programs in thousands of schools. Students learned not just to identify manipulated content, but to understand the human impact of digital attacks. High school senior Maria Gonzalez in Phoenix, Arizona, credited the program with helping her recognize and report deepfake content. Targeting a classmate. "We learned about the Pinewood case in digital citizenship class," Maria explained. "When I saw similar fake photos being shared about Jessica, I knew exactly what to do." Maria's quick action led to the identification and prosecution of the perpetrators before the fake images gained widespread circulation. The case demonstrated how education and awareness could prevent attacks, rather than just respond to them after damage occurred. The preventive approach inspired new research into early intervention strategies. Dr. Angela Foster at the University of Michigan developed algorithms that could identify potential deepfake campaigns in their earliest stages, before content achieved viral distribution. "The key is catching attacks within the first hour of distribution," Dr. Foster explained. "After that, content spreads exponentially and becomes much harder to contain." Her research attracted funding from technology platforms eager to improve their response times. Instagram and TikTok implemented systems based on her algorithms, reducing the average time for detecting and removing deepfake content from hours to minutes. The business world also adapted to the new reality of deepfake threats. Executive protection firms began offering digital security services alongside traditional physical security. Corporate boards received training on crisis management for deepfake attacks. Targeting company leadership, insurance markets responded by developing specialized coverage for deepfake-related damages. Policies covered everything from reputation management to legal fees to business interruption costs. The insurance industry's involvement provided additional economic incentives for prevention and rapid response. Celebrity clients drove much of the demand for these services. High-profile entertainers, politicians, and business leaders recognized their vulnerability to sophisticated deepfake attacks and invested heavily in protection and detection systems. The democratization of deepfake technology meant that attacks, once requiring significant resources, could now be executed by individuals with basic technical skills. This accessibility made prevention and education more crucial than ever. Rachel's work with the National Digital Safety Foundation expanded to include training programs for law enforcement, educators, and mental health professionals. The systematic approach to victim support developed around her case became the national standard for responding to digital harassment incidents. Every victim deserves the kind of comprehensive support that Rachel eventually received, explained Foundation Director Sarah Mitchell. "Our goal is to make that support available immediately, not after years of struggle." The Foundation's Victim Assistance Program had helped over 1,500 individuals by its 5th anniversary. Success rates for achieving legal accountability and removing harmful content exceeded 85%, compared to less than 20% for victims who faced similar attacks without organized support. Research institutions continued studying the long-term societal impacts of the case. The Martinez Center for Digital Ethics at UT Austin published annual reports tracking changes in public attitudes, legal frameworks, and technological capabilities related to digital harassment. Dr. Amanda Chun's latest research revealed encouraging trends in teenage attitudes toward digital responsibility. Students who received education based on the Pinewood case showed significantly lower rates of engaging in online harassment and higher rates of reporting problematic content. Education works, Dr. Chun concluded. Young people respond to real stories about real consequences. Rachel's willingness to share her experience has directly prevented countless attacks. The story had evolved from personal tragedy to global movement, touching lives and shaping policies across continents. Rachel's decision to fight back rather than suffer in silence had created ripple effects that continued expanding 5 years later. As she prepared for another international speaking engagement, Rachel reflected on the unexpected trajectory her life had taken. The chemistry teacher who once feared that fake photos would destroy her career had instead built a new career, protecting others from similar attacks. The fake images that had once represented her greatest nightmare had become the foundation for her life's most meaningful work. Sometimes the most devastating attacks can become the source of the most powerful advocacy. If victims find the courage to transform their pain into protection for others, the Pinewood High case would be remembered not just as a crime and its punishment, but as a catalyst for fundamental changes in how society understands and responds to digital harassment. Rachel Martinez's journey from victim to advocate demonstrated that even in our increasingly digital world, individual courage can still change everything. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.